Right, go on then. Give me something else on this bullshit G2 one though. Like, why is G2 the fifth best? Who's the four before them? Give me the four before them. Why are they fifth? Come on, hit me with this. What's the reasoning? Come on.
I mean, I'm just looking at the actual draw of G2 was like absolutely.
Oh, and in the end they got the two finalists, didn't they? Yeah, it's true. Yes.
They start with Pain Gaming, so okay, that's there's only one team, right? They are the favorite against. Then they face Korea seed 1, which I think H80 was one of the best team at the tournament, even though they fell short to BLG, but I think they were very strong. I would rate them top 4.
Those are the 4 teams. So the 4 teams are T1, BLG, Hanwha, Gen G, and then you're putting G2 fifth, yeah?
Yeah.
Right, that makes sense. Okay.
Right, because then they beat Weibo, which is a semi-finalists. Then they actually lose 2-0 to T1, but T1 is the world champion in this tournament.
Yeah.
And then they have this very close series where I think they kind of they didn't play perfectly, obviously, right? They had these hoopsies in game 3, but it didn't look like a series where BLG was at ease against them. I think that one of the weaknesses of G2 was like Mickey X wasn't playing well, but On wasn't playing well either. So it was a pretty scrappy series. And then they got out of the tournament. But if you look at like the track record, right, losing 2-1 against the world finalists in a close series, losing to the world champion, beating the semi-finalist, and losing in a BO1 against the Korean seed 1.
By the way, that was even a close game as well. That was a good one, though. Hanwha Life on that was a close one. That was the one where they were doing the comeback.
It was a close one. So if you were to like, you had the chance to take the same teams, right, and like just generate different world draws over time, I think that's eventually you'll get G2 to converge towards like the 5th position, like top 5. I think there are probably like occurrences when they can make it the top 4. They would probably like have a tight series in quarterfinals. But looking at the gameplay and looking how they play to BLG, I can't really wrap my head around any other team in the quarterfinalists that looked like amazing. Because I think that, for instance, LNG looked really, really poor in quarterfinals. And so even though they made it, I don't think that FlyQuest or LNG were significantly better than G2. And so the take should be, if we were in a normal podcast, I would say you look at like what G2 and the draw and the system, but it's much better to say that G2 was actually a top 5 team that got eliminated in Swiss stage because the format is really, really dog water. And yeah, that's it. So I think they are actually legitimately from the scrim results, from how they played on stage, from the results against BLG, I'm pretty sure they could have made top 5, even top 4.
I like the way he just threw it again. He did it again. Why did he just throw the scrim results in at the end there? Like all the rest of it was like normal argument. He's like, if you put in scrim results, then they're basically like the best team in the world. So like, all right.
Because otherwise, Kira is not annoyed.
Oh, okay.
And it's not doesn't.
Okay.
I mean, I'm getting the.
Oh no, you are playing him like a fiddle. You are like the way you're doing it. It's like well, listen, I can tell it's like all an act, and you're just masterfully doing this. But like you're baiting him in every time. Like every time at the end, he's like ready to stop listening. Then you just throw some shit. Go on, then hit me with it, Kira. What do you think of this take?
I'm actually just like shook to my actual bones. By the way, well. Why are they converged? Like, first of all, like they could actually statistically get like actually a harder draw than this, would you call it? But they could also get like a bunch of like easier ones. But they actually still have to play an exit like BO3, and they've had like this team's like shown the ability to like fail easy given exit BO3s, for example against NA. Like, because here, for example, I noticed you slid this in here, like Zabatine, right? You snuck this one in here. And you're like, oh, LNG and Weibo Gaming, what do you call it? They look like dog shit in like the playoffs. It's like, yeah, but like, what about Fly? What about do G2 have like adapted to all those like FlyQuest drafts as like well as like Gen G did, and would they have been able to like overcome them and win all those lanes? It's like that would have been interesting to see. Like that would have been an interesting match. I don't think that would have been free. Like I think FlyQuest were dog shit, but the FlyQuest that played against Gen G was not anywhere near as bad. The other thing is like, for example, like we LNG. Like, we got more data on LNG, like, and so therefore you can't. But the problem is like, you don't get free data for like games you didn't play. Like, for example, you could just mythos it and just be like, well, G2 versus Weibo Gaming, Broken Blade would just be getting solo killed by Breathe all the time. How are they supposed to play? Like, that's really my issue. When you put it like when they converge towards 5th, I do agree they are in that ballpark. Like, they are in like the area of like 5th, 6th, like in that like area, like stuff, for example, and we were unlucky to grab like BLG and T1. But here's the other part as well. they also still grabbed BLG when BLG looked fucking dog water as well. Like BLG were still not good even in like when they were exiting like groups, and like they still have like massive problems. Like Elcon Ezreal still hurts my brain to like this day, and they got like a freebie. Like no, Ezreal should never be able to die that game. Like it should be almost impossible, and they were like, and in some ways they were masters of like their own fate, and also they drafted double Orianna Nocturne into T1 and just threw that entire like BO3 on that like draft pick as well. So I have very little sympathy for them in those like generalities, but I do agree. If you run the tournament lots and lots, they would go closer to like fifth, but they would lose to a lot of people.
Isn't it outrageous though that like they end up in the same situation as like Mad Lions, who are like absolutely terrible?
I mean, the where they placed doesn't like show how good the teams were.
Yeah, that's true.
Right? It's like, I mean, you can probably make the same argument for TL, but I think TL played way worse. But when when I was looking at like all the hot takes you can make, I was like, so I'm gonna try to think about like some Western approach, right, or some Western hot take. And when I look at like the Western teams and their overall performance, I'm like, okay, so Fly is probably our biggest satisfaction of the tournament if we're Westerner and we're open-minded, supporting both NA and EU. But I think the most egregious point is like that this G2 team was not playing bad. I think this G2 roster was actually able to produce more. We saw it at MSI, and I was so upset by the format to see Mad Lions, Fnatic that had no ambition whatsoever to play well, and G2 for the same round of the tournament and have no chance to prove themselves. And then at the same time, you see like LNG kind of like slipping through the cracks and then looking like absolutely terrible in quarterfinals. I feel like the outcome of Worlds as a whole, maybe it's a hot take, is random. Like, do you think like legitimately, like if you redraw everything, like T1 wins? Like T1 wins against BLG. I feel like there is so many. It's like the outcome of what's random.
Here's the problem. I know what he means, Kira. As in, like, one thing I do always wonder about in League especially is I feel like compared to any other esports game I'm aware of, it's the only one where I actually think every variable, almost like the butterfly effect, changing one variable changes every variable. And the reason I say that is, I'll give you the best example because a lot of people by now will know this narrative. There's a detail everyone always forgets about last year's T1 win, which is the joke is when you go back and look how T1 played and when they changed their draft, it's actually Gen G did them the favour by beating them in like that 1-0 game or whatever, because after that game they were like, fuck playing this meta, like this doesn't work for us, we'll go to our shit. And then so the joke is if they actually didn't play Gen G except like in the finals, maybe they would never have been that good. So similarly, I actually sort of know what you mean by that. Like there's a world where like it's already the case that people usually agree all Worlds does, because it's single elim and Swiss with bad seeding, is tell you who the best team was, but it definitely doesn't help you with the rankings. Like I agree with you go down the list, like for all we know maybe Gen G was the second best team, but the problem is because they're on the same side as T1, you play them. By the way, the harshest ones are some of the other ones, like Hanwha Life. Like Hanwha Life, maybe they were the third best team, but we'll never know. They went on the round of 8. It makes them look shit now, doesn't it? So I sort of know what you mean by that.
Yeah, the really famous ones actually. In 2017, Samsung Galaxy probably doesn't win the tournament if they're not in the group with RNG, because they literally learn how to play the game by being in a group with RNG, because RNG absolutely fucking annihilates them, and they proceed to then copy them for the rest of the tournament. By the way, that's like another thing about like, what do you call it, with like Worlds, just to like talk about team rankings, because we spoke about this. I actually think that HLE lineup is mega underrated, by the way, at this tournament. As in, if they had matched up into Gen G and T1, also this tournament could look very, very different. Like they could have beaten all the Korean teams, if they had played each other, could have like beaten each other. I think potentially like Gen G T1 could have went loads of different ways if Lens doesn't lose his mind, but. BLG was just the kill team for that, like HLE. HLE just cannot beat that BLG team because Thorin Ben is just it's like the year that Chovy went with the 1 year he went with Griffin. Like Griffin were actually a threat at that year of Worlds. They just couldn't play against IG. The minute the Sword had to play against the Shy, it's just like pack up your books, everyone get back in the school bus. We're going back to Korea. Like it's just unplayable. But so yeah, like that is another like really good point. The variance in like Worlds now, particularly with Swiss, like Swiss is just basically you had the world's worst format. Now we're at the second ones, and the variance on like what can happen and who can be like eliminated is absolutely crazy. It also makes like the sides of the brackets like really, really heavy in terms of like stacking the teams. on top of each other. It gets really, really strange because even if you don't always like exit or get out at like the same time or like where you truly should be. So you have like LNG leaving as like a 3-0 team, but then they're not actually like that good relative to like the bracket, and therefore like it kind of makes it really strange. So yeah, I agree.
By the way, on the G2 one, the only problem you had with the setup of that one is it was actually tricky initially to tell Zabatine if you were making which one of these 2 points. Were you making a point about the format, like as I just said there? An obvious example would be the reason why Animal Life could be the third best team is because for all we know they only lost to BLG, lost to T1. Maybe they would have been in the semis, but I couldn't tell. Were you trying to make that point? Because essentially that point is almost like we're as good as FlyQuest. Like spoiler, FlyQuest was almost in the semis. Or were you making the point that actually from the eye test they were the 5th best team? Because if it's the latter, you are absolutely wilding. There's no universe where if you looked at the eye tests, you were like, yeah, actually G2 probably were the 5th best team at this tournament. No, I agree with you. If you look at who they played, first of all, they did end up having one of the hardest draws again. You're absolutely right. I mean, it's not even that. I guess the problem with the draw one is this. T1 is technically the 4th Korean seed, so we can't wait till they win the tournament and go, what the hell? I'm playing the World Championship. Because at the time, actually, 4th Korean seeds, it won the better draws you can have. But the BLG one sucks, obviously, because they were the number 1 seed from LPL. They won everything in LPL, so I'll give you that one. Also, by the way, even drawing Animal Life's a tough draw. They were number 1 LCK seed. They did have a very, very tough draw. So, like, I do think this is one of the harder draws they could have had. And they even then, I agree with you on the BLG. They weren't even that far from getting out still. They almost even as scuffed as they were, like, tripped up and got out of this group and definitely could have drawn an easier path. I don't think they actually were the 5th best, but I agree with the general point about the format. Like, I actually do think one of the other factors I like about Double a Limb is I always say to people, if you have a low bracket, it's not like that can avoid all seeding issues as well. But because you like flip the bracket, if people don't know, every 2 rounds you flip what side of the bracket you drop down to make more matchups. It does, I always say, to me, the lower bracket can sort of work as like an error correcting. Like if you think something was really unfair in the upper bracket and then you see a different opponent, that usually does tell you like either they were that good or that bad or it's fair. And then I also think the good thing about the lower bracket is it literally places you. You go 2nd, 3rd, 4th, you do that, etc. Except obviously you get the 2 spots for like 5th to 6th, 7th to 8th and all that jazz. So I sort of agree overall with the old point. See more cool, funny, interesting clips based on topics from my content? Well, subscribe to this channel then, or, you know, be a pleb and don't.